This is Inside the Right. All right, Tim, Nikki Haley has announced that she would vote for Donald Trump. Here's a quick clip of that moment.
Trump has not been perfect on these policies. I've made that clear many, many times. But Biden has been a catastrophe. So I will be voting for Trump.
So, big question here. What kind of an impact do you think that this poses for Joe Biden, who is likely relying on some faction of Nikki Haley's coalition here?
Yeah, look, I want to, I do want to get into the merits of our argument because they're so stupid, but why don't we do politics first? I think that it's not quite as bad as it might seem on its face for Joe Biden. Nikki Haley's support within the Republican primary, this group we've been talking about, this 20%, 25%, most of those people were people that were with her because they were for any option besides Trump.
Right.
Like that was their rationale. It wasn't like they were super Nikki Haley fans. It was just they were there because they were looking for any vessel that they could to register that they were unhappy with Donald Trump getting the nomination again. There was another smaller segment, I think, because she was a good candidate. There could have been an anti-Trump candidate that got 12% or something. Because right. She was a good candidate, I do think she appealed to another additional group. And that group was going to be potentially people that Joe Biden could game with, in this time, this election coming up. And so I think that's still possible. I think that some of those people will probably roll with Nikki. I think that's a pretty small number. And then I think there's another group of people she's kind of giving a permission structure for. And then Joe Biden and other types of Republicans are going to have to make the counter argument and are going to have to win the argument over the course of the year. And I think that's still possible. I like these groups that we're targeting. It's not like these are mindless automatons. They're going to do whatever Nikki Haley wants. Like Nikki Haley's not ahead of a cult like Donald Trump is, right? Yeah. Ideally, it would have been, I think, very useful for her to endorse Biden, because maybe that would have been the nudge that some of those people needed. But since she didn't do that, we're going to have to figure out other ways to nudge him.
I think you're right that this wasn't a pro-Haley contingent. It was an anti-Trump contingent, largely. Yeah. But just to talk about Nikki for a moment here, before we get into the broader implications on Trump-Biden 2024, what does she stand to gain from this? Because first of all, she herself served as a huge embarrassment to Trump. She was a longtime detractor, and so there's a ton of ill will that she built up among the Republican base. And you know this better than anybody, there is no room right now in the Republican Party for someone like her anyway. So why sacrifice your integrity for a future in the Republican Party that has made it abundantly clear that it doesn't want you?
Yeah. So my answer to this is, fundamentally, Nikki Haley and I see the future of the party differently. And so I don't think she has anything to gain from this because I don't think that the party is ever coming back to Nikki Haley. So let's just suspend disbelief for a second, pretend like we're in Nikki Haley's world. We're hanging out with Wall Street Journal readers on Sullivan's Island or whatever. In right. Their worldview, the logic for Haley is, I'm young. It's not even just 2028. Who the hell knows? 2032, 2036. Joe Biden's like 30 years older than she is, right? There's a long life ahead.
Yeah.
And that if she does what Liz Cheney did, it's over, right? Like that is putting the nail in the coffin of her future in the party. If she does this, then, options are still open. See what happens. Be malleable. Who knows? Maybe things will break her way. Maybe Trump will pick her for something. Maybe Trump will die. Maybe, something crazy will happen and shake up politics a little bit. I think that is her logic, that this is like, that saying that she's going to vote for Trump was the minimum ante for feeling like she was going to still be relevant within the party.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you don't vote for Trump, then you're anathema in the party.
Right. Then you're just
she might end up anathema anyway, but yeah, persona non grata. Yeah. So that I think is her logic. I don't think it's insane logic. I think it is, immoral, and I think it is ill-advised. But I think that that's rational. There's not a 0% chance that, we don't all have a crystal ball. This keeps her alive within the party. But to me, it's just not a worthwhile. I think it's a very low likelihood and not worthwhile given the stakes and the threat of Trump.
Tim, do you think that she views this as like herself as like, and even yourself to some degree, as like a Republican in waiting, like waiting for the party to go back to what it was? And do you think there's any validity to that? Because everything would suggest that as we've seen the rise of people like Ron DeSantis, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, the party is moving more toward the direction of these MAGA folks, that we're getting fewer and fewer of the Jeb Bushes and John McCains out there. So do you think, and do you think she thinks that the future of this party is a reversion back to what the Republican Party was, and do you think there's any validity to that?
Yeah, I don't think so. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think that we are on a path. Who the hell knows what 20 years from now what'll happen, right? But at least in the near term, foreseeable future, these folks are moving towards MAGA no matter what happens with Donald Trump this time around. That's my opinion. I do think Nikki Haley has the counter view to me. And, you know, I think a lot of that's wish casting. But we're not perfect at predictions, right? I thought Hillary was going to win in 2016, right? You know what I mean? So you never know. Sometimes you're wrong. I think that in this case, it is Haley that's wrong. But I do think that, look, if you listen to her announcement, you know, one of the things that stuck out to me, well, the biggest thing that stuck out to me was just how incoherent her argument was, but we can get to that. But the other thing that stuck out was her endorsement of Trump was super lukewarm, right? Like if this was like I want to just go full MAGA and I'm doing Elise Stefanik or something, or I'm trying to get back into the party, her language would have been different, right? Like her endorsement of Trump was super lukewarm. And I think to me that speaks to her mindset, which is kind of what your question is, that she thinks that she'll hold down the fort for the whatever you want to call it, establishment, old school Republicans, and maybe the party will come back to her, and it's better to, and this keeps her alive for that potential future. To me, that seems to be her play.
Okay, I want to ask you about your colleagues over at the Bulwark. This is a question that I was especially interested in because, you know, if we're talking about a Republican Party that isn't a home any longer for normal people who value like democracy, that is precisely the Bulwark. So I want to know about what the thoughts have been among you and your colleagues. But first, just a reminder for those watching right now, if you want to support Tim and his team over at the Bulwark, please make sure to subscribe. I'll put the link to their YouTube channel right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Very important to build up this whole pro-democracy ecosystem as it spans from left to right. Okay, so Tim, bring me through like what this whole Nikki Haley promise to vote for Trump has been like over at the Bulwark.
Yeah. Look, we were basically pretty split. There was a contingent of us that expected Nikki Haley to do this. I think some of either the darker ones among us or those like me, I come from political world. I knew Nikki. I actually consulted for Nikki a lifetime ago. Hell, what was it? 10 years ago, I consulted for Nikki. So I knew her, and I kind of sensed that she was going to do this. She's a political animal. She wanted to stay alive. There were some others that were, I think, hoping that she would do the right thing.
You're like the bane of Republican politics. You were born in the dark.
Yeah, a little bit. I forget about the rest of that line goes.
Me too.
But I was. Yeah, you guys don't know what it's like. You Ernest Lives. Couldn't have survived a day.
Yeah.
So I kind of expected it. I think that our general mindset of it, the thing that everybody agrees on, whether they were disappointed or whether they saw it coming, was that this is not a huge boost to Trump. This is kind of status quo for Trump. The thing we were hoping for was that she could give a boost to Biden. You know, and I think that is really the analysis over there. And I think that most of the people at the Bulwark have come to terms with the fact that this is going to be a long time in the wilderness from this party. You wouldn't be at the Bulwark if you didn't think so. You know, if you thought that the party was coming back to us, you'd be at National Review or doing something else out there. You'd be doing, working on Nikki's campaign or whatever. So we're all pretty aligned that this is going to be a time in the wilderness for our type of center-right candidate. And we're all extremely alarmed about Trump. And our number one priority is ensuring that Trump doesn't win because of the scale of the threat. And so in that sense, it was like, ugh, it could have been a boost for Biden because there is that category of people I think she might have been able to pull over. Look, it's not like disaster or anything. I think it's kind of status quo on where the race is, and now we're gonna have to look to other, hopefully moments in the campaign to try to win over some of those folks.
Right, and I think your point at the top of this video about these people not being like bots for Nikki Haley,
right.
Like she snaps her finger and they follow her off the ends of the earth. I think that's an especially important point, that she was a vessel, an outlet for this anti-Trump sentiment, and just because she herself has proven herself more inclined toward her own personal ambition doesn't change the fact that these people have very real issues with Donald Trump, and that isn't going to change just because one person decided to follow her own personal ambition as opposed to having some integrity. I do want to ask about Biden now. So what do you think Biden has to do in light of this news, now that Nikki Haley won't be a direct ally herself?
Yeah. And so this, I'll get to Biden, but just let me frame up why I'm going to make this suggestion. If you listen to Haley's arguments tonight, she basically says that she wants somebody that's going to be strong with our allies and against our enemies, a strong border, and a capitalist, economic growth. Like those are her arguments. She also has said in the past that she thinks that Trump does not have the character to be president. Actually said that in an interview with me quite a while ago, but on this campaign. And she said other things like, he doesn't, when she typed her husband that he was unfit, or, he wasn't fit to even leave the post office or something. I forget the exact line. But okay. The type of, there's a voter that is totally aligned with her on all that stuff, right? Like they want us to be strong with our allies, they want a strong border, they want a strong economy, and they think Trump has bad character. So Joe Biden has to make a case to those voters that he's better for them, for people that believe those things, than Donald Trump. And I think he's got a good message on that stuff. He's been allied with NATO and Ukraine. Trump is with Russia. He's never written love letters to Kim Jong-un. Trump has. Like, check on the first one. The second one's a little tougher. But again, he wanted to come to the deal with an immigration deal with James Langford, a conservative. Trump killed it. Right? So it's maybe not the strongest argument, but he's got one. And on the third one, on the economy, look, our economy is doing better than other economies in the world. Donald Trump wants to come in and put a 10% tariff on everything. That is not conservative. That is not pro-free market.
Talk about the implications of that, by the way, because I think we hear this, and a lot of people don't have a clear understanding of what the practical effect of imposing a tariff like that would be.
And potentially huge on costs. I mean, look, again, these type of Haley voters are the ones that align with more of the old school traditional Republican point of view, Wall Street Journal. We're free markets and free trade. You know, that's out of vogue in the majority of the party, but these voters still exist that believe that. Putting a tariff on every good that comes from overseas, like the argument is like, well, okay, that'll help us, people that manufacture here. And I guess, on the margins in certain sectors, but that is going to raise costs for everything. That is going to have a huge impact on the market overall. I think it could cause major disruption in the stock market.
And even products that are made here, by the way, all encompass different parts that are otherwise made overseas. So something is going to raise the prices, and it's going to be felt by the consumers here. So you have these people who are upset about high prices at the same time that Donald Trump is vowing that what he'll impose is an agenda that is virtually assured to raise prices.
Yeah, so that's a good message for regular folks who are worried about prices going up. But if you're talking about these, rich capitalist bastards in the stock market, do you think that these global, companies that source from all over the world, do you think they're excited about that? Like, that is going to cause huge disruption to these companies and their stock prices. This just goes against fundamental economic free market principles. Okay, so whether or not everyone watching this believes that, the voter that I'm talking about, the Nikki Haley voter, they are anti-tariff. They're certainly anti the extreme tariffs that Trump is putting forth. So, can Joe Biden make a case to them that's like, sure, I'm still a Democrat. I'm not pandering to the middle. All I'm telling you is I'll be with NATO. I am not gonna, put these insane tariffs on overseas goods. Maybe I'll tariff from China, but not from our friends, not from our allies. And I'm trying to get a reasonable border deal. And I do have the character to be president. Donald Trump doesn't. I think that's a compelling case to these voters, and I think he can still win some of them over. And I don't think this endorsement precludes him from being able to win them over at all. And it's something that some of my colleagues that work for Republican voters against Trump are going to be working on.
Yeah, and by the way, I would also recommend for people who aren't following Republican voters against Trump on Twitter, they do some of the best ads that I've seen thus far, and I would highly recommend following them online if you're not already. Tim, let's finish off with this. Any hope for another Nikki Haley interview with you over at the Bulwark?
Don't think so. I think that I sent a hate tweet to her son Nayland earlier, so I think that I think that ship has sailed. Such is life. Maybe another day. Life is long, as I said. Maybe 2030.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Well, again, for the interviews, for the rest of the interviews, even though Nikki Haley isn't in the immediate future here, again, for those watching right now, please go ahead and subscribe to the Bulwark. I'll put the link on this screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
I'm Tim Miller.
This is Inside the Right.